Welcome back, children. Now we are going to look into all important events and incidents that led to the nationalism in India. This video is divided into two parts. Part 1 from the year 1915 to 1920 and Part 2 from 1920 to 1947. So, shall we begin? Children, now let's look into all important events or movements that took place between the year 1915 to 1920. We begin with the effect of the First World War on India. Then we go through the Satyagraha movement. Then we see what is Rowlatt Act and Khilafat movement, followed by the non-cooperation movement started by Mahatma Gandhi. Children, as we all know, the World War began in 1914 and ended in 1918. The outcome of this war affected all the countries in the world, and India was not an exception. Now let's see how this affected India. The British introduced income tax and doubled the customs duty. Due to bad harvest, the crops failed and this resulted in food shortage. The spread of influenza killed many people in India. Lastly, many Indian men, young men, was forced to join the British army to fight the war. Because of these reasons, the Indians got annoyed with the British, and this led to a discontentment in the minds of the Indian people. The idea of Satyagraha. In January 1915, Mahatma Gandhi returned to India. When he saw the situation in India, he advocated a noble method of mass agitation called Satyagraha. This method was based on the idea that if someone is fighting for a true cause, there is no need to resort to physical force to fight the enemy. Gandhiji believed that Satyagraha could win a battle through non-violence. He introduced many Satyagraha movements. In 1916, he introduced the peasant movement in Champaran. In 1917, he introduced the peasant movement in Kedar district. And in 1918, the mill worker movement in Ahmedabad. These movements spread like wildfire in many states of India, which led the British very angry and annoyed. The Rowlatt Act. This act was passed by the Imperial Legislative Council in 1919, but the Indians or the Indian members did not support this act. What is Rowlatt Act, children? According to this act, enormous powers were given to the government to repress political activities, arrest any political leaders, and put them in prison without a trial for 2 years. On 6th April 1919, Gandhiji launched a Satyagraha movement against this act. This movement had a very huge response. People came out in support in various cities. Shops were shut down. Workers in the railway workshop went on strike. The British decided to clamp down the nationalists. Several, or let's say many, local leaders were arrested, and Gandhiji was not allowed to enter Delhi. On 10th April 1919, the police in Amritsar fired upon a peaceful procession. This created more anger in the minds of the Indians. Martial law was imposed in Amritsar, and the person who took charge of this was General Dyers. Jallianwala Bagh incident. This took place on 13th April 1919, on the day on which Barsakhi was celebrated in Punjab. A large crowd from the village came to participate in the fair in Jallianwala Bagh, and also there were few people who came to protest against the new rules laid down by the government. This park had only one entrance. General Dyers clocked or closed the entry point and started firing at the people. Hundreds of people were killed. When this news reached the people, it led to a violent turn. The government also was quite brutal in its response. The Khilafat movement. Children, as we have seen in the earlier chapter, the Ottoman Empire was badly defeated in the First World War. There were rumors about a harsh peace treaty likely to be imposed on the Ottoman emperor, who was also the spiritual head of the Islamic world, the Khalifa. So a movement called the Khilafat movement was launched in Bombay in the year 1919 to defend the Khalifa. This movement was led by the Ali brothers, Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali. Gandhiji was waiting for such an opportunity to bring the Hindus and the Muslims on a common platform. At Calcutta session of the Congress in September 20, a resolution was passed to launch the non-cooperation movement in support of Khilafat and also for Swaraj. Gandhiji, in his book Hind Swaraj, wrote that it was because the Indians cooperated with the British was able to rule India. If Indians refused to cooperate, the British rule in India would collapse within a year and Swaraj would come. Gandhiji believed that if Indians began to refuse to cooperate, the British will have no other way than to leave India. So he introduced the non-cooperation movement, which was launched in 4 stages. Number 1, surrender of title, which were awarded by the British government. Boycott, civil service, army, police, court, schools, etc. Boycott foreign goods. Launch full disobedient campaign if the government persists with repressive measures. Children, this non-cooperation movement spread like wildfire. It spread in the town or cities, the countryside, and also in the plantation. Now let's look at them one by one. Let's see how it spread in the town. The middle class people started this movement. Thousands of students, teachers, headmaster boycotted schools. The judge refused to go to court. The shops remained shut down. The people started boycotting foreign clothes and even burning them. In the economic front, the production of Indian textile mills and handlooms went up when people started boycotting the foreign goods. But unfortunately, this was short-lived. It was a failure, children. What was the reasons behind this? Number 1, khadi clothes were very expensive and the common man could not afford them, so they had to go back to the foreign clothes. Number 2, there was no other alternate institutions for the students and teachers, judges, etc. So this affected the livelihood of the people and they had no other choice but to go back to the schools, the offices, the courts set up by the British rule. Now let's look at the non-cooperation in the countryside. Here we are going to discuss about the movement that took place in Awadh and the movement that took place in Godam Hill, Andhra Pradesh. The peasant movement in Awadh was led by Baba Ramachandran. The peasants or the farmers was against the high rents and many other taxes which was demanded by the talukas and landlords. The peasants demanded reduction of revenue, abolishing of begar, and social boycott of oppressive landlords. By the end of 1920, Jawaharlal Nehru and Baba Ramachandran formed the old Kisan Sabha. But unfortunately, this movement took a violent turn. Clashes broke out between the peasants and the landlords. When Mahatma Gandhi came to know about this, he called off the movement. Now let's see what happened in Godam Hills. Tribal peasants gave their own interpretation of Mahatma Gandhi and the idea of Swaraj. The tribals were prevented from entering the forest to graze cattle or to collect fruits and fireworks. A military guerrilla movement was organized against the colonial opposition or oppression under the leadership of Alluri Sitaram. Rebels attacked the police station, attempted to kill the police, and carry out guerrilla warfare for achieving this. When Mahatma Gandhi came to know about this, he also called off the non-cooperation movement in Godam Hills in Andhra Pradesh. Now let's look at the non-cooperation movement that took place in the plantation. According to the plantation workers, Swaraj meant freedom, means the right to move freely in and out, to retain the links with the village from which they had come. But under the Indian Immigration Act of 1859, the plantation workers were not permitted to leave the tea gardens without the permission of their owner. But when the non-cooperation movement spread to the plantation, many workers started going against their owners. They left the plantation and headed towards their home. But unfortunately, they got stranded on the way because of railway and steamer strike. They were caught by the police and brutally beaten up. Now children, we come to the end of part 1 of this chapter. Hope you have got a very clear picture about all the incidents that took place between 1915 to 1920. Thank you for watching and listening this video. I will be back again with the part 2 of nationalism in India.